All right, so far we don't have anything on our page that we can see other than the title. And we've discussed how just because we don't see these on the page doesn't mean they're not important. So we remember from our last video, hopefully, that when we show up in search engine results, whatever we've put in the title element is going to show up right here. So this is the biggest indicator to someone as to whether or not they'd want to come to our site or choose our website based on what they've been searching for. And then we have our opportunity to make our elevator pitch with our description meta. So the content of our description meta becomes really important if we happen to show up in search engine rankings. But now we need to make sure that we get some content on the page. We're going to do that here in step 2 of part 2 by adding a body element. The body element here is going to take up the bulk of what we're going to do for this assignment. And I know it looks like a lot, but it's really not. So let me show you how this is going to work. The body element, now remember again too, nothing comes in between the closing head tag and the opening body tag. These two are siblings and they are the only children of the HTML element. So there shouldn't be anything in between the opening HTML tag and the opening head tag. There should be nothing in between the closing head tag and the opening body tag. And there should be nothing in between the closing body tag and the closing HTML tag. However, our body element does need to have children so that there's something on the page. So the first child of the body element is going to be, in our case, a header element. This is not always the case, but for us it will be. Header is going to have two siblings actually. Header is going to have as its first sibling an element named main, which is going to hold our main content. And then last sibling is going to be an element named footer. Again, I'm opening and closing them all at the same time just so I don't forget. And I want to make sure that I open them and close them in the same column so that that parent-child relationship is really easy to see. This also makes it a lot easier to see if I forget a closing tag. And that'll break my code. Okay, so let's start by building the header. I just put a little bit of space in between each one so that it's easier to see. And in our header element is where we're going to build our main navigation bar. Now, if you remember, that was planned out already in our sitemap here. So our main navigation bar needs to have a home page with content about me, if this is my portfolio site. It needs to have a portfolio page, a resume page, a contact page, and a link to download a PDF resume. So we're going to build all of that in here next. So within the header, the way that we organize navigation, or one of the best ways to organize navigation, is inside a list. We want to group these together in a way that's meaningful so that the browser knows they belong together, but also so that anyone who might be using screen readers or other assistive technology to use the web, the screen reader is able to make sense of how these are grouped together. So what we're going to do is inside the header element, we're going to open up a new child called nav. And I'm going to open it and close it. It's going to be the only child of header, but nav is going to have a child. Nav is going to have a child that is an unordered list. And then when we make an unordered list, that's a bullet list in plain language. Every item in the list also needs to be wrapped in a pair of tags for list items. So I'm going to open up a pair of list items here. Now, the next thing I can do is write the word home. But the only problem with this is not going to be a link yet. Let me show you what it's looking like so far. I'm going to bring back my empty page here. And if I reload, you can see now I have this home, right? But I can't click on it because I haven't made it a link yet. Right now it's just a list. So you could always build out the list first, but I find it's easier to build one item and then make copies of it, just like we're doing with the template, so that I don't have to work as hard. So the way that I make a link is with an element called A, which stands for anchor. So I can open up my anchor element here, and I can make sure that I close it right after the word home. But in order for it to be an actual link, an anchor needs two different attributes, at least at a minimum. The first attribute is just where does the link go? That's called the href attribute. So I'm going to code in my href attribute, and for now I don't have a page yet. I don't have a place to link to. So I'm going to put a hashtag in there, and that creates what's called a recursive link, and it means that it functions like a link, it just doesn't go anywhere. And then the other thing that I must have on an anchor element is a title attribute. And what the title attribute does is it describes the page, or it describes what I'll find if I click on the link. And again, this is mostly for screen readers, but it's also important to search engines. So in this case, I could go ahead and give this an actual title because I know what the home page is going to be. So in this case, the content was going to be about, so I can just type learn more about. And I'm going to put my name. You should put yours. But I'm going to type learn more about Lindy Hughes. And that's pretty good title text, so that if somebody's just hovering over that home link and they're not sure that they want to visit it, that lets them know a little bit more about what it's going to be. So again, if I come here and I reload, you can see now it looks like a link, but if I click on it, it doesn't go anywhere. It just adds this little hashtag to the end of the path that we were already at. However, if I hover over it long enough, a tooltip shows up that has that title text that says learn more about Lindy Hughes. And so this is one of the reasons why we want to have that. So let's go ahead and build out the rest of our navigation bar. The way I'm going to do that is by copying this complete list item, and I'm going to paste more of them inside my unordered list element so that I'm making a single unordered list that has 5 list items in it. So I'm going to paste it once, twice, 3, 4, and that should be all I need, right? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to update this per my sitemap. So portfolio would be the next. And then there was resume. And then there was contact. And then there was a PDF resume. Okay, so now I just need to update the title attribute for each of them so that it's different for each page. Let's see. View. An apostrophe S in HTML is a little tough. I'm going to try it though. I believe it is view Lindy and then a backspace apostrophe S portfolio. We'll find out if that works or not. This might be where we need that UTF-8. Let's go ahead and save and see. Okay, so they're all showing up. Yep, not quite right. Okay. I think I might be able to just have the apostrophe there. Yeah, that looks fine. It's the title and description that make it harder. Okay, so now I could take this same text, copy and replace the title attribute for the resume and just change it to view Lindy's resume. And then contact, which I misspelled. I could just change this to contact Lindy Hughes, and I probably want to be more descriptive about your next design project. And then this one would be something along the lines of download Lindy's resume. Okay, so that gives me everything I need for that. Now this is that thing I was telling you about with Sublime Text where it sometimes pops up with this message. Your subscription's not running out, your trial's not running out. So this is going to pop up periodically just asking if you want to buy a license. If you can't afford one or you don't want one, you can always just click cancel and keep using it. Now, if you use it a lot, eventually you might want to support them and pay for a license, but you don't have to. Okay, so let's save. And we shouldn't see a whole lot of change here on our preview, but if we hover over each one of these, we should see that those title attributes are showing up as tooltips. And that completes our navigation bar as far as the HTML code's concerned. I know it's not much to look at yet, but we're not worried about looks right now. Right now, we're just worried about describing the content appropriately and making sure that we are accurately describing the hierarchy of all of the content on the page. So the next thing we need to handle is the main element. But what I'm going to do first is actually, I'm going to build the footer out first, because the footer needs to look a lot like the header. It's going to need these same elements of a nav element, a UL, an LI, and anchors to build my external links. So I'm going to go ahead and at least build that structure in by opening and closing a nav element. then opening and closing an unordered list, because this is also going to be a navigation bar. It's just a secondary navigation bar. And then I could actually copy a list item from up here so that I don't have to write all that code from scratch again. And again, here, I just need to refer to my sitemap, which is right here. And I need a link for a sitemap, a mobile wireframe, desktop wireframe, CSS validator, HTML validator, and a style guide. I'm going to see if I can just leave this kind of off to the side of the page here so that we can see it. Make it just a little bit easier to keep up. Okay, so my first link here needs to be sitemap. View the sitemap for this website. Okay, and now I can copy this list item and update this one to be mobile wireframe. Okay, now I've got my mobile wireframe and I've updated my title attribute as well. I can copy paste this one and just change the word mobile to desktop. Now after desktop wireframe, we go to CSS validator and HTML validator. So I'm going to change the title to be validate my HTML. And at this point, I'm actually going to copy the anchor element from the assignment instructions, only because this is one of those pieces of code that I told you about that's just a lot harder for me to explain how to write and be easier for you to just copy paste it. So I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to copy this HTML code for the validation button. All the way from the opening anchor tag to the closing anchor tag. I'm just going to copy all of that. And I'm going to replace this anchor element with it. If you've taken 152, you might be wondering if I should clean my text, right? Well, the thing about a code editor is it is already a plain text editor. So it already cleans the code for me, or the text for me. Although I can see some things that are in there that we don't need, which are these little non-breaking space elements. You'll learn about those in the next assignment, but for now, suffice it to say, we don't need it, so I'm going to take it out. Unfortunately, Brightspace puts those in there and I can't take them out, at least not as far as I've learned yet. So this gives me the complete code for that. And then I need to do the same thing for the CSS validation button. So rather than copy pasting, I'm going to open and close a pair of list item tags. But again, I'm going to return to my assignment here, and I'm going to come and grab this entire anchor element for the CSS validator. And I'm going to just place that code inside this pair of list item tags. Again, I'm going to remove these ampersand NBSP semicolon every time I see them, because I don't need them. And then I'm going to make sure that my code is indented properly here. So I just want to make sure that my anchor element opens and closes at the same left-hand indentation. So if you do all of this, you're almost done with your footer. Let's grab one more list item from open to close and paste it. Remember, all of these list items in the footer are going to be grouped in a single unordered list. So we only need one pair of UL tags with a bunch of list items inside. And I'm going to change this one to style guide. And just update my title text, be view the style guide for this website. Okay, so make sure to save. And then let's take a look in browser. I'm going to pull my page back over that I've been working on and just refresh the page. And we can see now, again, it's not much for all the code that we've written, but we are starting to have the beginnings of a page here. We have two nav elements. We have our primary navigation and our secondary navigation, and we have placeholder links for all of them. So we're almost ready. The only one that shouldn't really be a placeholder is the sitemap here, because we actually have a link for it, right? We've been looking at this sitemap this whole time. So what we could do is just copy the link for this sitemap. The one thing I want to point out to you as we're looking at this, by the way, is that this is what is called an absolute path. An absolute path is very closely related to an external link because it gives the full web address to the page or to the resource. And that's because since it's not hosted on our site, we have to give that full web address. So keep in mind that absolute paths are very closely related to external links. And when we need to reach an external link, we generally have no choice but to use an absolute path. However, when we're linking to pages on our website, we're going to make sure that we use a different kind of path that we'll talk about in a little bit. But for now, just keep that in mind that we're going to use an absolute path, and that absolute path gives the full web address. So I'm going to replace this hashtag inside the href attribute, right? So I need those double quotes still. I'm just going to add new stuff where the hashtag is. I'm going to replace it with the absolute path to this sitemap on Gliffy. So an absolute path starts with HTTP or HTTPS : and gives the full web address. Now, we don't want to do that for pages that we are building on our own website. So once we start building these, they're going to look a little bit different. For now, we could go ahead and make the home page the template link. This will change, but just so you can understand how it works, when we are linking to content that is on our website that we've built, we use what is called a relative path. So a relative path is very closely related to internal links. And when we are linking to internal content, we use a relative path, and that is short for document relative. So a relative path tells the browser where the resource is as relative to the page that we are on. So let's say, for example, that my home page here was this page that I'm calling test.html. It's not, but let's say that it was. And I wanted to link to it from the template page here. Well, what I would need to do is tell the browser where test.html is as relative to template.html. In this case, they're both in the same folder together. So all I would have to do is name the page. So a relative path looks like this. Now, sometimes there's a little bit more to it than that, but for now, suffice it to say, for internal links, we use relative paths. And relative paths just tell us where the resource is as relative to the page we are on. For external links, we use absolute paths, and those give the full web address of the resource that we're trying to link to. Okay, so now we have a fully functioning header and footer, and it should be now that if we save our unsaved changes, I know I have unsaved changes because of the dot up here instead of the X. So if I save it, make sure that my page turns to an X at the tab here instead of a dot. Then I can come back to the browser, reload the page, and I should be able to click on the sitemap and see that sitemap. So if you can't, make sure that you update that. Now, if you can't, if for some reason something happens and it doesn't automatically reload, you're going to want to do something called clearing your cache. So clearing the cache means that we talked about this a little bit, that the browser has its own downloads folder. And if your page doesn't update while you're building it, like if you just see a hashtag appear up here when you click on that sitemap link and you know you've updated it to where it should go somewhere else, you just need to clear out the browser's downloads folder, which is called the cache. The way that you do that in Chrome is to go to the Chrome menu and choose Clear Browsing Data. If you use this as your everyday browser, you don't want to clear the browsing history or cookies and other site data. All you really have to do is clear cached images and files. If you do that, a lot of times that's going to fix a problem to where you know you've made a change to your code, but it's not showing up. So if you're having that issue, make sure that you clear your cache. It's a little different in Firefox. I think in Firefox it's in the history menu. It's a little different in every browser. If you're using Safari, it's the trickiest. So if you're using Safari, let me know and I will help you through it. But otherwise, just make sure that you've gotten this far, and then in the next video we'll build out the body element together.